Hey everybody, Pete Greco with Productive Corporation here. Thank you for jumping on with us. Looks like we have a few people still popping in, and I'm about 1 minute early, so we'll kick this off in probably about the next 30 seconds, give everybody a chance to hop on with our webinar, What's New with Advanced Threats in 2018. All right. Hey, everybody. Again, it's Pete Greco, Vice President of Sales and Technology with Productive Corporation. Thanks for jumping on with us to talk a little bit about what's new with advanced threats. Got the idea to put this together when I was doing a little bit of research and just found some interesting articles about what was out from 2016 and 2017 and what was on the rise mid 2017 into 2018, and I thought it'd be an interesting webinar to do. So we're going to do Meet Productive in 1 minute. We'll get through that as quick as we can, no more than a minute, I promise, and then we'll get this show underway. And I don't have my colleague Todd over here to keep me on track, so I will do my best to make sure that I get everybody out of here in less than 30 minutes. So who is Productive Corporation? We provide security solutions for mid-sized companies. We also are in the backup business, and part of what we do is offer specialized expertise to help you navigate tech support, to help you get those licensing issues taken care of. We also implement, test, and optimize for the huge bulk of products that we sell. That includes vulnerability and security assessments, Active Directory, security services, a huge way to prevent massive compromise, keep that Active Directory tight. We also do a lot of configuration and training around UTMs and provide a lot of UTM services. We'd love to talk to you in that area if that's something you need help with. We also make a lot of educational content like this show, and you can check that stuff out at productivecorp.com/content. You can also visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/productivecontent. And the bottom line, we can help you, so give us a buzz, 800-726-4099. Call your Productive rep, shoot us a note, help@productivecorp.com. Feel free to reach out to me directly, pete@productivecorp.com. So we've accomplished our first bullet. Let's keep this party rolling. A couple years ago, and if you look at some of our older videos, you'll see a lot about exploit kits. My favorite was Nuclear Exploit Kit, but Angler was by far the big dog in that arena, and they vanished off of the face of the earth, and it was seen that Angler EK attacks were down by almost to zero, right? And they kind of put together that it was probably the Lurk gang that was behind that, who had been busted for another set of attacks, and it was about 50 people busted in Russia, if I remember correctly. And so I'm sure that they are in the process of going through rehabilitation. And probably no future hacks from that crew, or at least until they can get access to a computer, right? And part of what made exploit kit usage so big is that a lot of these guys were renting it out and providing it as a service to other hackers so that they could have ways to bypass security, including Emmet. We talked to a lot of folks who, want to give Emmet a try. I feel like it's this end all be all. If you're not familiar with it, Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit is what it stands for. But even Emmet was regularly bypassed. And the interesting thing about the exploit kits, I always thought about them as kind of a reverse patch scanner. So they're scanning your system. They're looking for the exploits that are available, If they don't find any, they go away to avoid any kind of detection. If they do find something, then they use an attack for that specific exploit. And where that was a huge improvement over previous attacks is they would just attack everybody, right? And then they would, the security researchers would be onto the attackers much, much quicker. That information would get spread amongst all the security organizations who could then go to work on trying to figure out how to prevent it with their individual technologies. As hackers got a little bit smarter, they kind of started figuring out, well, if I can't be successful, let's don't do anything. That way I don't raise any red flags. And exploit kits really took that to the next level, right? So one of the big things that we saw in place of EKs, which are time consuming to create, you really got to know about the vulnerabilities and be searching out those 0 days. And again, that's where the Lurk Gang was so successful with Anglers. They had more 0 days than anybody in their product, right? But a lot of folks started seeing that it was easier and quicker to make money with ransomware, and so ransomware really had a massive increase in 2017, and these numbers are going to look tiny for 2018 as we start to see those numbers come in. And where ransomware is having a little bit more widespread success and is on the rise is it's really relying on the user to click on something and invite them in. And a lot of folks are talking about, putting alerts in emails, but we'd seen a survey that said a lot of end users will click through anyway just to see what will happen, right? And so that's where phishing training for sure is needed and needs to be done nearly continuously to get these folks to understand the problems that they're causing for themselves and the organization, right? But we also need to figure out how to reduce the wide attack surface. And we have a lot of conversations with folks that really are going a long way in locking things down. But we also have a lot of conversations where management feels like to block anything or lock anything down means that you don't trust the employees. And the challenge there is this really isn't about trust, it's about protection. And to put it all on the employee to not ever bring in a ransomware attack or some other kind of malware when their main job is an accountant or a marketer or a office administrator or whatever it might be, really is a little bit unfair. And it's our job on the security side to really figure out how to bolster protections to protect those folks as well as the organization. And part of the challenge there is really helping management understand that what we're really trying to avoid is a downturn in business, a huge expense, and potential bankruptcy. And if you ask the CEO, hey, would you rather let folks go to any website that they want and declare bankruptcy or lock that down? The easiest answer obviously is going to be to lock that down. And so we need to make sure that we're doing our part, right, to help defend against that. But the ransomware guys are going to be ramping up their game. So even if your company is full on behind you, or if you're one of the unfortunate ones who've received additional budget because you had a ransomware attack already, you got to continue to be vigilant because they're going to be up in their game. Now, the next thing that we see is a lot of folks feel like they're not worried about ransomware because they can restore data. And that's really the final thing that you should be thinking about is if all else fails, I'll be able to recover. But a lot of times, waiting for the attack to happen and propagate and then coming back and trying to do the cleanup and then do restore when you don't have the right tools can actually be more expensive than just paying the initial ransom. And I think City of Atlanta and the Colorado DOT are going to bear that out with the amount of folks that they had down. Even though they didn't pony up, I think for City of Atlanta it was $50K if I remember correctly. Even though they didn't pony up the $50K, guaranteed they spent way more than $50K in downtime and recovery because they didn't have the the proper tools, right? And so the ransomware folks are going to be looking for more and more organizations to take advantage of because it's profitable for them. Now, ransomware hogs all the glory because it makes it into the news. It's pretty easy for folks to understand kind of what it does. It's locking your data down. It's making your Word docs inaccessible. The layman can understand that. The most non-technical person can get that's a problem. One of the big and not necessarily new, but on the increase attack vectors is coming through PowerShell. And as I was really looking into this at the end of last year, I couldn't believe how many PowerShell attacks I could easily find. You know, a lot of times when you're actually looking for threats to download and play with in a quarantined or sandboxed environment, you know, it can actually be kind of hard to get those. But PowerShell attacks are posted everywhere and easy to see. And some of the big collections of PowerShell attacks come from PowerShell Empire, which when we put this together, contained at least 50 pre-built attacks. I actually went through and counted them up, and it's almost 100. Right? And then you got Nishang and PowerUp and PowerView and PowerSploit and just a whole host more. And what you're getting when you download one of these kits, right, is just a massive amount of pre-built, and I'm not going to read all these folks, a massive amount of pre-built PowerShell scripts that you can start launching. And of course, the challenge with a PowerShell attack, right, is PowerShell's on every machine. It's not going to throw off an endpoint security alert. So if you're running an up-to-date antivirus program, you've got your device control on, you're running the application control, chances are a PowerShell attack might still get through. And if you look at a couple of these, the name of them is pretty clear on what's going on. Exfiltration, lateral movement, persistence, privilege escalation, all stuff that we don't want to happen in our environment, right? And so we got to start thinking about new ways to block these kinds of things from happening because they're going to get more and more widespread because they're defeating AV. AV doesn't see anything. It doesn't go off. It's not getting triggered, right? So the next thing that is on the rise, atom bombing. And I tell you what, you know, I'm not the foremost expert on security by any means. My job really is to help provide you all with a base level of education and then get you put in front of the experts like our man Josh Moore, who can really help you get stuff battened down and on top of stuff. And atom bombing is probably one of the most confusing things that I have learned about and really tried to get a good understanding on so that I can do a great job of educating you all on it, right? And this is really some deep code stuff here. And what atom bombing is doing in the most basic of terms, feel free to read all these words, I'm not going to read them to you, and it affects all Windows version. It doesn't require any kind of software vulnerability to work, so there is no patching. Getting up to date on your patching, which you should do, isn't going to help with this kind of an attack, which again doesn't mean you shouldn't do that. Patching prevents so much other stuff like the EKs, for example, so you still want to do that, right? So patching is not effective here. And this effectively then is injecting malicious code into a legitimate process to make it easy to bypass security products, right? And so the three stages of an atom bomb attack is to write to the target process, right? Hijack the thread, inject that code, and then really restore that process. And this is happening, you know, in nanoseconds. Then restore that process so that it's running. That's when the code actually starts working. Your AV is not going to see this at all. And some of these attacks, again, because there's no malware to scan, You're not necessarily going to see it at the UTM level. And if you're running a basic firewall, this stuff just screaming right through. You can just put that thing right in the trash. It's not going to do anything for you, right? You got to be talking next gen or UTM, and even there, a lot of this stuff is not going to get detected. And the scary thing here is you may see the results of it, but you may not be able to identify how you've been attacked when it comes to atom bombing. So wasn't even thinking about crypto mining when we started building this thing, but had a situation with now a new client who had been crypto jacked, and I thought we better put this in here. And so I'm not super down with the Bitcoin. It just feels a little too loosey-goosey for me. But a lot of folks are making money in this speculative arena, and one of those ways is crypto mining. And if you're not familiar with that, that's basically where you're helping to build the blockchain in exchange for Bitcoin or maybe some other cryptocurrency, right? The challenge here is it is expensive to do that. You know, you're not just pulling out your old laptop and leaving it on. You need a lot of processing power, and some folks are really buying these specialty pieces of gear to do this crypto mining and get these incremental additions of Bitcoin. And the first thing that they see, right, is that you need a pretty beefy, a lot of folks are using GPUs instead of CPUs. The graphics processors for some of these gaming boards really do good work, but they use a lot of power, right? So you need an expensive graphics card or a lot of CPU, and then you need a lot of electricity to do this. And so what some of the criminals have figured out, right, is they want to take advantage of that, but a more economical way to do that is to leverage your resources. And so we've done a little bit of research. Again, we had a client come to us saying that they were having an issue. We got in here and found out that they had been cryptojacked. They didn't know. They knew they had a problem, and they really needed someone to come in and figure it out. And so, you know, we'd uncovered that they'd come in through kind of a fileless malware attack that exposed it. Once they had implanted the code, they were able to disable the endpoint security product so that the code could run. And what the IT team, which was quite small, was seeing is really just a massive use of resources, but they couldn't really figure out why. And they kept trying to kill stuff, and it kept resurfacing, right? So super expensive for you, super profitable for the hackers. So our advice there is don't get crypto jacked, right? As we were putting this together, I really was trying to kind of figure out what's the most interesting ransomware out there, you know, because we see a lot of the splash screens that, and I don't know if the hackers are trying to be cute or if they actually think they're doing you a service by stealing your money. Right, but probably the funniest one that we saw is from 2006, and I'd never heard of this until we were putting this thing together. A ransomware that locks the whole machine and displays porn until the user sends an SMS text, which costs them $10. So pretty cheap to recover from it. Pretty embarrassing though, and for sure the kind of thing that I'm guessing a lot of folks jumped on. There was no information on how much money they anticipated that these guys got away with, or not too much information beyond that, but just thought that was an interesting thing to throw in there for you. So, you know, with all of that being said, exploit kits are still around. I'm anticipating that we might see a resurgence, or we might see exploit kits and ransomware starting to get merged together, especially as some of these lurk folks may be getting released in the next few years. They built that tool. They were quite successful with it. I doubt that that's going to go away. Right. So one of the top ways to defend against those, patch. And it's always a great first thing to do in your environment, right? We talk a lot about these advanced threats and fileless malware because we're really trying to help folks understand that they don't need an additional layer of security for their endpoint, they need another first layer that's designed to look for these different kinds of attack vectors, as well as helping them shore up the rest of their environment. But traditional viruses are still around. I was doing some fooling around in my sandbox before this thing happened. And one of the things that I like to do is when I get crazy junk mails, I like to forward them to my ilikeToFish@outlook.com email address. If you have anything that you think could be a nasty attack, would love to see it there. And I launch them in my sandbox to see what goes on. And I'm always surprised at how many of those are generic or basic viral attacks where they're trying to have success. And what they're looking for there is they're doing a spray and pray. They're probably sending out this email to 1 million or a couple of million or millions of subscribers. And they're just looking for a few users who are not up to date. Maybe their home security product has expired 90 days after they bought that laptop 3 years ago or whatever. So there's a lot of that stuff that's going around. And some of these things probably have been around for a really long time and are still just circulating around the internet and getting grabbed by pretty low-level hackers. And so you definitely got to watch your back on those guys. You know, it's just like when you're walking down the street. You got to be on your lookout for the common street thug. You also need to be aware of the mafia and the sophisticated gang syndicates as well. So we got to be on our lookout for all of that stuff. One of the things that for sure we're going to be seeing more and more of is fileless ransomware. That's on the rise. And obviously the big benefit there is no files, nothing to scan. Traditional AV is going to be bypassed, and you're not going to be able to identify that there's a ransomware attack until all of the pre-work for delivering a ransomware and encrypting your data has been done. And then they can get, even if they can't get all of the data, they can hopefully get enough of the data to get you to pay. Right, so fileless ransomware on the rise, as well as other kinds of fileless attacks, seen more and more in 2017. And these fileless attacks, they're not brand new. Some of them are, but the concept is not brand new. Some of these have been going around since the 90s. And again, what's happened is in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there was just so few folks who could actually pull off this kind of an attack. And so these people have been able to commoditize these attack vectors and turn these into little hacking kits that they can then rent or sell or do this malware as a service type deal, and then get that mid-level hacker a tool that they can use. And so now they're not on the front line. And this is really kind of the mob boss type mentality. I'm not on the front line. You're the one taking all the risk. Everything is tracking back to you, and I'm just getting my cut from you, right? And so it reduces their exposure and their risk, and they're making a lot of money doing this, and we're going to see more and more of that moving forward. So I know everybody's asking themselves, all right, Pete, you did a lot of talking. You know, what's the solution here? And unfortunately, I don't have just a product to throw at you. We do have lots of products, and we'd love to talk to you about all of them. But you know, part of it is just doing the hard work, and the challenge there that we can appreciate is we know that for probably almost everybody on this call, security is not your only job. You maybe don't have all the budget that you need, and you got a lot of hats that you're wearing and a lot of fires that you're trying to put out, and spending the time even to probably do this webinar probably has gotten you a little bit behind on your day. So some of the most basic things to do is to have a plan to regularly evaluate your security posture. And that regular evaluation, not daily or weekly by any means, it kind of depends a little bit on your business though. Are you in a high risk business? Do you have a lot of compliance? Are your clients starting to impose their compliance requirements onto you? And that's where you might decide that you need to do something monthly, quarterly, bare minimum for anybody. We really recommend twice a year. And that's something that we can help you out with. And we can do that in a couple of ways. One of those ways is We can just come in and do a vulnerability assessment, provide a report. We can stick around and help you fix stuff, or we can leave it to you to go fix it on your own. Or we can help you create a framework where you're doing that assessment and help you identify what are the things for you to monitor that are tailored to your specific organization. The challenge with a lot of the stuff that I look at, and I'm sure you guys do as well, top 5 things you should do, top 10 things you should do here, three things to lock down or reconfigure or whatever. And a lot of times when I'm looking at that, I see a lot of stuff that's not really specific for my environment. I might get something out of it, but it's really not going to be 5 things that I can do to make my security better or make my backup faster or whatever. I really need to figure out how does my business work, and that's something that we can help you with. Next thing, figuring out how to get some monitoring outside of your endpoint and firewall. We talked to a lot of folks, 10 years ago, we talked to a lot of folks that didn't know that their endpoint was out of date. They didn't know they had a bunch of agents deployed but weren't turned on, all kinds of stuff like that. And the products have improved enough that you don't have to worry about turning it on. They deploy on. Duh. That's pretty basic, right? But there's a lot of features to these things, and they're doing a lot, but they're not telling you everything, right? They're certainly not helping you identify anything that's happening at the switch level or on the network level, right? And so monitoring that whole environment, combining information from the firewall and the endpoint, as well as your other network resources, can really give you a lot of visibility on when you have an issue or when you have something going wrong, so that you can see indicators of compromise much, much quicker and get moving forward on remediation before something really becomes widespread. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. Co-managed SIEM is a great first thing to start thinking about, and you can ask your productive rep a little bit more about that, and they can give you a nice education, right? And then probably the last thing that I'll throw out here is be looking for ways to reduce that attack surface. And one of the easiest ways is continuing to lock down the internet with web content filtering, moving that to the endpoint. I've really become a huge fan of doing that and recommend it in nearly every scenario where we're engaged on giving advice, because it follows the laptop now. And a big challenge that a lot of folks have is they put in a nice gateway solution. They've got it configured the way that they want, but then that laptop goes home and they might not have any protection, or goes on the road, or goes wherever. And really changing that web content filter conversation from a productivity conversation, which is really what it was in the 2000s, get folks off of Amazon and get them back to work, or off of eBay or whatever, and get them back to work. And really it's now needs to be more about saying no to parts of the internet that don't help your organization. If you're a bank, if you're some kind of a nonprofit or a school or whatever, there are huge chunks of the internet that are not adult sites, that are not gambling sites, that are not some other kind of harmful site, but they don't help your organization. Why not block them? If they don't help your organization get to the next level, they don't help employees do their jobs, simply saying no to them prevents attacks from coming in from those areas, right? So it doesn't prevent everything. Just because you've whitelisted all the sites that are really helping your business, it doesn't mean that those are all going to be clean, or they're business sites, so they must be clean. Plenty of those places are getting infected, but now you have a much smaller threat vector to scan and defend against. Right, so that's some of the stuff that we recommend. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Todd threw on this Q&A slide. Happy to answer them. And while I'm waiting to see if anybody asks a question, I'm going to thank everybody for hopping on with us. I really appreciate your time. Look at there, I did get it done 1 minute shy of 30 minutes. So I am to be commended on that. If you know me, I could keep this thing going until 5 o'clock if I wanted to. But it doesn't look like any questions rolling in. So I'm going to thank everybody for your time. Your productive reps will probably be following up with you today or tomorrow. And if we can help in any way or get engaged with you to talk more about security, we sure would love that. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day, and hope to see you on a future productive webinar. Take care.